She wasn't on the guest list. She was the reason the event existed.
December in Manhattan was gray and heavy, as if the entire city was holding its breath for something important about to unfold. Along Lexington Avenue, a line of limousines and SUVs stretched down the sidewalk in front of the Linton & Sharp building, a 57-story glass and steel tower known for hosting exclusive, invite-only investment conferences. Outside, amid a sea of gray suits and cashmere coats, a woman stood still. Her long black hair was tied in a low ponytail, her black wool coat simple, her brown flats slightly worn. She carried an olive-green canvas bag that looked faded, like she'd just stepped out of a library or a Brooklyn cafe. No one noticed her, and if they did, they likely assumed she was an early admin staffer or someone's assistant. "Excuse me, ma'am, can I help you?" A white security guard stepped out from the main lobby, eyes skimming over her with suspicion. "I have an appointment. Ava Linh," she said calmly. The guard looked at her for a long second, then glanced back down at his iPad checklist. "I don't see your name on the attendee list for this morning's conference," he said, polite but cool. "Today's event is private, for investors and partners of Linton only." She didn't reply, just looked up at the towering glass building, gleaming silver against the foggy sky. She had walked through every floor of this place, not as staff, not as a guest, but as something else. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back. This area is reserved for car drop-offs," the guard added, his tone now tinged with impatience. She nodded slightly, then pulled out her phone, pressed a speed dial. The line barely rang once. "Alina, I'm in the lobby," she said calmly. "They don't recognize me." Up on the 41st floor, in a meeting room with deep blue carpets and chandeliers casting warm yellow light, 3 senior executives of the Linton & Sharp investment firm were anxiously preparing to greet a key figure, the founder of Vireo Capital, a private fund dominating the urban renewable energy space on the East Coast. None of them knew that the woman asked to step away from the car zone downstairs was Ava Linh, the founder of that fund. And more importantly, she was the controlling shareholder behind the real estate conglomerate that had just acquired the entire Linton & Sharp building the month prior. Ava stepped into the main lobby after receiving a signal from Alina, her executive assistant, who had just arrived via the private elevator from the 43rd floor, where Vireo Capital's temporary office was set up. None of the front desk staff noticed anything unusual. They saw an Asian woman walking in beside a white woman in a navy suit with an internal badge, and naturally assumed the Asian woman was tagging along. "We'll use the VIP entrance on the left," Alina said quickly in a low voice. Ava nodded, walking slowly as her eyes skimmed the reception area. 3 front desk workers, 2 white, 1 young Latinx, were busy checking in guests. As they passed, the female receptionist glanced at Alina and gave a small nod, but not one gaze lingered on Ava for more than 2 seconds. Still invisible, Ava thought, a feeling far too familiar. She wasn't angry or hurt, just more certain of one thing: her presence, or more accurately, her absence in people's assumptions, was exactly where the real story began. On the 41st floor, the Green Frontiers Future of Urban Energy Conference was about to begin. Inside, more than 80 chairs were arranged in a U-shape around a small stage, bearing banners of Linton & Sharp and several minor sponsors. No Vireo Capital logo appeared. Even though Vireo had covered 47% of the operating costs for the entire conference series, not under its own name, but through a real estate investment entity, which happened to own the building. Ava stepped into the meeting space, and the silence was dense. No one knew who she was. No one guided her to a seat. Her name was on no placard. And then, something interesting happened. "Excuse me, who are you looking for?" A white man in a dark gray suit blocked her path. His name was Gordon Reese, senior director at Linton, and the same man who had declined a partnership with Ava 2 years prior when she proposed a solar energy initiative for residential areas in Queens. Ava raised her head and looked him directly in the eye. "I'm not looking for anyone," she said. "I'm sitting here." Gordon frowned. This area is reserved for Tier A investors and speakers. I know. Ava smiled lightly. Alina arrived just in time, holding out her internal badge. Ms. Lin is part of the Strategic Investment Coordination Team, the primary sponsor of this building. Gordon glanced at the badge, his frown deepening. We don't have an Ava Lin on the speaker list, he said stiffly, trying to stay polite. No, Ava replied, because I'm not a speaker, I'm the moderator. She walked past him without waiting for another word. No one stopped her. When the panel began, the atmosphere held the usual decorum of an investment event. Tailored suits, expensive perfumes, the soft clatter of laptops. Gordon introduced the speakers, 3 executives from major funds, a Harvard environmental expert, and a young white startup founder in hydrogen energy. No one mentioned Ava. She sat front row, stage left. Quiet. Observing. The presenters spoke of breakthrough technical solutions, integrated ESG strategies, and IPO viability by 2026. Everything followed the script. But to Ava, the most telling part wasn't on the slides. It was in the people missing from the stage. Community reps, field engineers, or anyone actually living in the neighborhoods they were planning to redevelop. During the Q&A, Ava raised her hand. The moderator, a blonde woman with a smooth voice, glanced her way, then said, We only have time for one more question. Yes, you in the second row on the right. Ava lowered her hand. She wasn't surprised. She leaned toward Alina and whispered, It's fine. I don't need a mic to be heard. Alina nodded subtly. Inside her bag was a financial report Ava had prepared, listing companies that Vireo would divest from if they continued excluding minority leadership from their boards. When the conference ended, Ava walked out of the room and no one stopped to greet her. A few people glanced her way but didn't know how to respond. Who was she? An assistant? A journalist? A silent donor? Only Gordon stood at a distance, watching, his face slowly registering that something was off. Moments later, an email from Vireo Capital's board arrived in every organizer's inbox, officially announcing funding withdrawal from initiatives that failed the Equity Inclusion Index. The woman told to wait outside that morning was the one who had just pulled the chair out from under their table. That evening, the investment conference ended with a discreet cocktail party on the rooftop, where golden lights spilled from chandeliers strung above faux bamboo clusters and tall Japanese-style lamps. The space had the air of an upscale gathering, but felt cold, like a room where everyone knew each other, and no one truly saw the newcomer. Ava stepped onto the terrace, a glass of lemonade in her hand. She didn't drink alcohol, not out of morality or habit, but because clarity was the sharpest weapon she carried. Gordon approached, his expression now cautious. Ms. Lin, I think there was a bit of a misunderstanding this morning. Ava turned to him, her gaze calm. We didn't misunderstand each other. We just view the world from 2 different coordinate systems. You have to understand, he said, lowering his voice. We welcome hundreds of partners every year. We can't possibly recognize everyone. Which is why, Ava interrupted, you only recognize the ones who look like you. No anger, no accusation, just truth. Others began to notice Ava speaking with Gordon. One was a rep from Darren Private, another a board member overseeing the North Harlem Investment Zone. They walked over, offering awkward smiles. Ms. Lin, one said, we were so impressed by what Vireo did in Newark, hoping we can collaborate in... Thank you, Ava replied with a gentle smile. But I believe the notice has already been sent to all relevant parties. Notice? That Vireo Capital will withdraw from partners who lack transparent commitments to leadership equity and community reinvestment. No more words were exchanged. Just the sound of wind and glasses clinking faintly from the guests inside. As Ava walked back inside, an older man, silver-haired, wearing a 3-piece suit, voice husky like a former Havana cigar smoker, stopped her. You're the one running Vireo, right? She nodded. I used to think, he said slowly, that investing had nothing to do with politics. But you reminded me, that's a privileges illusion. Ava didn't respond right away. She looked him in the eye, then said, "It's not that I want to dismantle the system. I just refuse to keep paying taxes to support it." He laughed, low and real, then nodded. "You don't need an invitation. You are the room." The next day, an official email from Vireo Capital went out. "We believe any partner who does not reflect the values we represent will not move forward with us. Diversity is not a slogan. It is a survival strategy." Several fund managers tried to reach out. None received a reply from Ava. Only Alina answered on her behalf. "The board has approved the decision. It is non-negotiable." And then the consequences started to ripple. 3 real estate brokerages lost access to the energy trading platforms. 2 urban renewal housing projects in the Bronx were defunded within the week. People began asking, who exactly is Ava Linh? On Saturday night, Forbes published an article titled, "The Woman Who Walked Quietly, Then Took the Room with Her." Inside was Ava Linh's full profile. Born 1985 in Garden Grove, California, to Vietnamese refugee parents. Studied physics at UC Berkeley, then earned an MBA in sustainable management. Former credit union officer, later strategy advisor at the Gates Foundation. Founded Vireo Capital with $45,000 in savings and one driving question: what if we stopped waiting for systems to change and funded those left behind ourselves? The article ended with one final line. Ava never sought attention, but her presence made it impossible to ignore her. Because she didn't shout, she simply withdrew her power from the room and left behind silence. Monday morning, the 43rd floor of the Linton and Sharp building was unusually quiet. The temporary office of Vireo Capital had been cleared out. No signs remained of the company that had just shaken up the entire East Coast green investment network. Only one meeting room remained. Plain white curtains pulled open on one side, letting in clean light. Inside, Ava sat across from Thomas Hargrove, Linton's senior managing director, a man who no longer carried the same air of authority he had 3 days earlier. "We need to talk," Thomas began. Ava nodded, saying nothing. "We didn't anticipate Vireo's reaction," he admitted. "Frankly, I didn't think what happened Friday would spread this far." Ava looked at him. It wasn't just about Friday, it was about all the years before. Friday was just the last drop. Thomas sighed. "If we hosted another event, one that formally includes your participation and the communities you represent, would—" Ava cut him off. "You don't need to redo a conference. You need to redo how you define a partner." She pulled a document from her bag and laid it on the table. It was a revised partnership proposal from Vireo. The first page read, FUMA. Conditions for continued collaboration with Vireo Capital on any strategic initiative. 1. 30% of advisory board members must come from affected communities. 2. Commitment to reinvest 10% of net profit directly back into local zones. 3. Quarterly publication of DEI metrics, diversity, equity, inclusion. Thomas read it, his face pale. "Is this an ultimatum?" "No," Ava said softly. "It's a final opportunity." That afternoon, Ava walked into the city event hall, where she hosted a special press briefing. No branding, no PR handlers, no promises, only the truth. No banners, no colored lights. Just a single microphone, a few rows of chairs for the media, and an Asian woman standing at the center of a bare room. "Thank you for coming," Ava began. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly. "I'm not here to accuse anyone. I'm here to ask a question far too many have learned to avoid. Who gets to decide the future of places they've never lived in?" She looked directly into the camera. 3 days ago, I was asked to wait in the lobby of a building I co-own. I wasn't angry. I just saw how the world still works. People are used to seeing power in a certain shape. White, male, gray suits, loud voices, never waiting. She pulled out a silver guest badge. "This is a pass I didn't need, because I walked in through the door I built myself." She paused. The room was as quiet as a song missing its last note. Vireo Capital will no longer fund spaces that make no room for diversity, not because we want to punish, but because we want to survive. She smiled softly. We're not looking for seats anymore, because we have become the table. That very night, her speech went viral. TikTok, X, LinkedIn, even Reddit. The hashtag #SheIsTheTable hit in one trending for 14 straight hours. The Wall Street Journal called the press conference the most powerful declaration in finance since the 2008 crisis. Vireo's office was flooded with partnership requests. A Kenyan telecom group proposed co-developing clean energy for schools. A nonprofit in Colombia offered to rebuild rural electric grids using social equity standards. A Scandinavian all-female finance alliance invited Ava to serve as a global advisor. But to all of them, Ava responded with one line. I don't work with those who need me to explain why my presence is valid. And in Manhattan, the Linton and Sharp building changed hands again, not due to loss of value, but because Ava's board decided to relocate their headquarters to a neighborhood being revitalized in Brooklyn. When asked why, Ava simply said, because I want to step out of my office and see the future I chose to serve. 1 week after Ava's speech, Bloomberg Business published its list of 25 quiet power influencers in global finance. Ava Linh ranked third. Her profile featured just 2 short lines. She never raised her voice, but the market listened anyway. At a public high school in the Bronx, the Sustainable Economics classroom displayed a poster printed with Ava's words. We were not born to fit into rooms that make no space for us. We were born to build rooms where everyone can enter, without leaving their identity at the door. A black girl in a worn hoodie stood silently, staring at the quote for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone, snapped a photo, said nothing, but her eyes shone a little brighter. Vireo's office in Brooklyn had no grand lobby, no towering reception desk, no imported marble tables. Just walls lined with community project maps, names of young engineers, and demographic data charts by neighborhood. Ava stepped out from a small conference room, holding a folder of handwritten field reports from an environmental team in New Orleans. Alina walked beside her, whispering, Tokyo invited you to speak at the Global Finance for Justice Summit. I declined, Ava replied softly. You're not interested? Ava shook her head. They asked me to talk about how a woman of color breaks barriers. I don't need to break them. I just stand still and let the system crack on its own. Later that day, with the office quieting down, Ava poured herself a glass of black tea. She stood at the window, looking out onto the street, where kids were biking beneath the new solar-powered streetlights installed by Vireo. Solar energy, free public internet, not to give, but to return. She opened her phone. A new message came in from an unknown number. Thank you. Because of you, I no longer feel I have to pretend in the boardroom. Nai 25, clean energy startup founder in Vietnam. Ava stared at the message for a while, then replied with one line. You don't have to pretend. You are the reason that room needs to exist. In a world that still equates power with volume, Ava Linh walked through every door with silence. No shouting, no permission asked. Just a woman who knew who she was, who knew what she stood for, and who didn't need a seat at the head of the table to lead the room.